thought I'd share my latest tutorial with you, which is a Kangaroo on a surface that I haven't used very much before. I did a test on it with my cowgirl, and I now decided to create a tutorial for my Ignite membership on Rising museum board. It's a lovely surface, really nice surface. It's made for mounting and matting portraits, as the name would imply. It's got a very nice soft surface. It's a matte soft surface. It marks very easily, so that's something to bear in mind if you do want to use it. It works like a hot press paper, so sharp pencils, relatively hard pressure, although I found I used less pressure on this than I would on something like a Fabriano Artistico, something like that. And the other thing that I really liked about it was that when you put the colour down, it was quite vibrant from the off, and I didn't have to use ridiculous pressure, and it layers very nicely. Now, this particular piece of this Kangaroo, the focal point normally for a portrait is the eyes, and with this piece, because it was a whole animal, I didn't need to kind of make the eyes anything particularly special, because actually the focal point on this specific subject is the subject itself and the texture of the fur. I used a combination of polychromos, luminance and light fast pencils. I found they worked really nicely together. The other thing that I found when drawing fur is the initial couple of layers, nice and gentle, just sort of plot your colour and where you're going to be going, and then really ramp the pressure up, but not so much that you are starting to hurt your joints. That's one of the things that I need to be very careful about, because I have joints that they can damage quite easily. So using light pressure for me is one of the best things about coloured pencil, and I've found that using the hot press papers, it's really quite tricky to get a nice coverage of the pencil, of the paper even. I did swap some colours around with this particular portrait as well. So the image came from Pexels. If you want to go and find it, you can find it on there. I found that the one side of the face was very much in the shadow, which I retouched slightly, and I swapped out the blues for purples, which I felt worked a little bit better, seeing as I was kind of taking the shadow out. I found that I had to experiment a little bit to see what was going to work well with the fur, because this was the first time that I was drawing fur on this particular surface. Going in gently and getting the fur strokes in, and the direction that the fur is growing in, and the kind of general texture of the fur worked really nicely for me. And I used a combination of pinks, browns, burnt siennas, those sort of pinky orangey colours, and there's a Venetian red in there. I found the light fast Mars black very useful, but needed to just brighten it up a little bit using the burnt sienna and the terracotta from the Polychromos range. Later on, I actually found that the luminance brown ochre was one of the best colours for this particular subject. I love the luminance colours, and I really like them on the smoother paper. I would class this as sort of like a smooth paper, even though it's still got quite a lot of texture to it. It was surprising how many layers it took, and I could keep on layering. It worked very nicely with the Scotch tape, which you'll see a little bit later. I didn't really use an eraser on it. It was more the Scotch tape, but what I would say is I caveat this with make sure you check that your Scotch tape is actually going to work with the surface that you're using, because it can lift the surface off, which is awful if you hadn't kind of realised it was going to do that. I kind of worked in sections, so kind of did the top bit of the body, and then we came down and we worked on the tail, and you can see here how I have brought in those fur strokes to begin with, so we definitely get an idea of the texture of the fur in those initial layers, which really helps you when you then start to build up the shadows and the shapes and all of that kind of thing. You're not sort of drawing onto just a flat piece of a surface that's just got flat colour on it. this is where the Scotch tape really comes into its own. You know, you get the layers down, and then the Scotch tape literally takes kind of it right down back to the paper, and it worked really well, worked really nicely. So again, just putting that initial layer down, you can see they're just single pencil strokes, just bringing in the idea of the texture on the Kangaroo's leg there. There was quite a lot of dark elements to the fur, but I wanted to really bring the warmth out. You know, it had very warm colours, and I wanted to bring that out, but also those, you know, to make sure that I really showcased the texture, which meant getting a good base down and then working on top of the base to get the sort of the you know, the nice quality of colour in there, and the contrast and everything like that. It was very simple to do, really. The fur, it just was single pencil strokes, really looking at where, you know, the shadows were, how the lights and darks kind of worked in the different areas. You can see there where you've got the initial layer with the light fast on, you can see the grain coming through. Then you need to go over with a slightly more vibrant colour, which I did with the burnt sienna and the terracotta, and we just kind of built that up a little bit, which worked really well. You know, I find those softer pencils can sometimes look a little bit dull on the surface, and it's just, we just need to brighten it up a little bit is all. And we come into the front area again, using this is a luminance sepia 50 that I've got here. I found it was just a really nice pencil to use within that shadowy area, so it didn't make it look black, but it just gave it something, you know, to sort of make it look a little bit more interesting than just black. And then I did use my black, and I think this is Delft blue that I used on the edge there, just to bring a little bit of interest in. I talk about colour a lot in my teaching, and I talk about the fact that colour doesn't make realism, and I stick by that, because colour doesn't make realism. You know, what makes realism is getting your tonal values and your structure correct. However, colour of course does have its part to play. And it's really nice to use your colour theory to bring in sort of, you know, complementary colours, that kind of thing, to sort of work with the colours that you've got going on in there. And that's going to bring an extra dimension to your work, but it isn't going to make it look more realistic. Your values are going to be where your realism comes in, and your colour is just going to add depth and vibrancy, which of course, you know, we want. So, you know, anybody thinking that, you know, I'm telling you, you can't use colour for realism, you kind of haven't really understood what I meant. You know, you could have this Kangaroo be bright orange and bright pink, and it would still look realistic because of the values in it and the structure of it. And that's kind of what, you know, what I was talking about. The blue's really nice because it complements the orange, but I felt having that blue down the edge on the shadow area there, it just wasn't quite working properly, which is why I chose those more duller purples down there. So quite a lot of different colours in here, quite a lot of different ranges of the oranges and the reddy browns, and they worked really well. They worked really nicely. You know, it was a relatively quick drawing. I think it was probably about 8 hours the whole drawing took me. And it was really enjoyable. Normally I work on pastel mat. I really enjoy working on pastel mat, and it suits my way of layering. But this surface, I'm getting to really like it. Now I'm getting to grips with it, and it just works really well. I missed the grass off. I chickened out doing the grass. I couldn't be bothered. But that's him all finished.